Get off my property before I call the police. That's what this unhinged, wild-eyed woman, Margaret White, screamed at me right there in the middle of what used to be my family's quiet fishing trail. I wish I was exaggerating, but no, this was real. I'd just come back to my family's old cabin after 2 years spent grieving my wife, Sarah, only to find my way blocked by concrete barricades and signs so official-looking you'd think Homeland Security was setting up shop in the woods. Private property. Sunset Ridge HOA. Margaret White president. Yeah, that happened. You ever get that feeling in your gut when you pull up to someplace loaded with old memories where your heart's racing, you're ready to breathe in the past, but instead you run headlong into a brick wall? That was me. My hands were still trembling on the wheel and my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The smell of lake water was all mixed up with the harsh chemical stink of fresh concrete. Our trail, my grandfather's trail, blocked off by barriers that looked permanent enough to survive a hurricane. Now let me back up a sec. My wife and I, we used to spend weekends here teaching local kids to fish, grilling on the dock, swapping stories until the sun disappeared. After she died, cancer stole her from me. I just couldn't face it anymore. It's crazy how one place can hold all the echoes of someone's laughter and all the silence after they're gone. I finally worked up the courage to come back 2 years to the day since I lost her, hoping maybe I could find some peace, maybe even honor her memory. The universe, of course, had other plans. The second my bumper smacked into those barriers, I hit them hard. I realized this wasn't some dumb mistake. Somebody had poured real money into this setup. Professional-grade concrete steel rebar, no trespassing sign staked deep in the dirt, and the name on every single sign, Margaret White. Thing is, whoever did this had gone above and beyond, right down to posting a weathered old survey map next to the new sign. The map still had my grandfather's signature on it, Clara Wilson, 1987. That hit me. That trail had been ours since before I was born. My grandfather carved his name in the dock post at the end of it. Sarah taught half the county's kids how to gut a fish there using a knife I still keep in my tackle box. I pulled it out, held it like a good luck charm, trying to convince myself this was just a bad dream. But the signs told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just HOA madness. Margaret had done her homework, dug up documents from 40 years back, and now she was playing queen of the neighborhood. Why wait until now, though? Why block me out right when I was finally getting back on my feet? There was something ugly going on under the surface. And it wasn't about property lines. It was about legacy. I'll be honest with you. I'm a retired accountant. I know when someone's running a scam, financial, legal, emotional, you name it. And this stunk of all three. I started taking pictures of everything, emailing myself GPS coordinates, snapping shots of the barriers, even sending copies to my neighbor Linda. Old habits die hard. Always back up your evidence, right? My phone showed 47% battery left. That detail's going to matter later. Trust me. As I stared at my grandfather's carving on that dock post out of reach behind a wall of concrete, I could practically hear Sarah telling me not to let these fools erase our story. My grandfather fought in Wubby too, so we could have places like this. Sarah fought cancer like hell, so we could pass those fishing lessons down to the next generation. And here I was staring down a woman who thought she could bulldoze all that history for a quick win. I spent an hour walking the perimeter, looking for another way in, but every path was sealed off. Every easement blockaded the work done by pros' permits hanging on every stake. This was bureaucratic warfare wrapped up in official stamps and smiley legal letters. But one thing was missing. No one ever told me. My family's right-of-way had been on the books since '87. Suddenly it's gone overnight. County records changed last week. Something wasn't adding up. As I was leaving, Mrs. Peterson from across the lake called out, "We heard about Sarah. Sorry for all this mess. Robert, the new HOA president's making everyone miserable." New president? We never even had an HOA on this side of the lake. I felt like I'd stepped into a parallel universe where the rules changed and nobody bothered to tell me. Back home, I dug into every scrap of paperwork I could find. I recognized the name Heritage Property Recovery Services. If that doesn't sound shady, I don't know what does. Then the email hit. Mr. Miller Heritage Property Recovery Services demands vacation of unlawfully occupied fishing structure within 30 days. Legal action pending. M. White rightful heir to Clara Wilson estate. Attached were legal docs stamped official, all the trimmings. But if Margaret White really was the rightful heir, why'd she need to threaten me? Why the power move? Why now? I could smell the bluff through the screen. But her paperwork looked ironclad: medical records, court filings, even family tree diagrams. It was a full court press, and I was just starting to realize how deep this rabbit hole went. So I did what any stubborn old fool would do. I drove straight to Margaret White's place, determined to look her in the eye and see what kind of person has the nerve to do this to a grieving man. She answered the door looking like she was running for office, hair done up, folder under her arm, the whole 9 yards. "Mr. Miller, come in," she said, all smiles and false politeness. The house was covered in maps and family photos. She walked me through her evidence, told me my grandfather bought this land cheap from her dying mother, Clara Wilson, for 15 grand back in '87. 200 acres worth millions now. "You stole our legacy," she said, voice quivering with practiced pain. Now I know my granddad. He was hard, sure, but not a cheat. Margaret pulled out medical records showing Clara's dementia at the time of the sale. Testimony from family who tried to block it. For the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Had he done something wrong? Then she hit me with surveillance footage she'd been filming my every visit to the trail for months, logging it all for legal protection. Her husband, Tom, paced the yard, face white as a ghost, eyes darting. She barked at him and the poor man jumped. If you want to know who's really in control, just watch how their spouse reacts, right? She had everything: notary seals, signatures, court stamps, except one thing didn't fit. Power of attorney signed January 19th, but Clara supposedly died in February. That timeline was tight, too tight. I started feeling lightheaded. Margaret insisted I take a water bottle, but there was something desperate in her voice. I politely refused, blaming the headache on stress. By the time I got home, I realized how high the stakes really were. Next thing I know, Linda shows up at my door, eyes wide with news that turned this whole thing upside down. She'd followed Margaret to Sunset Manor. Clara Wilson was alive. She played me audio of Clara confused, asking, "Who is this woman? My daughter Susan lives in Oregon." Meanwhile, Margaret was in the background pushing papers, insisting, "Just sign here, Mom. Trust me. You ever get hit so hard by the truth you have to sit down?" That was me. Margaret had been telling everyone Clara died in 2019, but there she was, alive, vulnerable, and being hustled by someone pretending to be her daughter. Linda had proof, audio, video, the whole 9 yards. That's when it got scary. Linda recorded Margaret saying, "Don't worry about that fishing man anymore. Tom's special water treatment is making him too sick to bother us." Suddenly, I remembered that weird headache, the pushy water bottle, and the fact I'd been feeling worse every time I visited the cabin. Turns out Margaret had forced Tom to install a chemical injection system in my well, lead and mercury enough to kill a man in weeks. When I finally collapsed at home, it was Linda who found me and called 911. Doctors said another 2 weeks I'd have been gone. You want to talk about twisted? Margaret had been running the same play at 6 other homes: chemicals, fake documents, isolating seniors, draining their accounts. Tom finally confessed everything to the FBI. Margaret thought her legal shield, restraining orders, power of attorney, medical guardianship could protect her. But Linda and Mrs. Thompson got the FBI involved. They brought in Clara's real daughter, Susan, who flew in from Oregon with proof of her identity. On live TV, Jessica Carter, the local news anchor, confronted Margaret with the evidence. Margaret tried to perform, but the cracks showed when Susan stepped forward, and then Linda played the audio of Margaret laughing about poisoning me. It was like watching a dam burst. Margaret went from cool and collected to a total meltdown, lunging at cameras, screaming about conspiracies, covered in mud, mascara running. The whole neighborhood was there, folks who'd believed her lies now shouting the truth. Even teenagers were filming her rolling around shrieking. The sheriff read her rights on live TV. FBI agents swooped in. Across 4 states, her partners were arrested. Her whole network crumbled, over $12 million in stolen assets, thousands of victims. The fishing trail. They tore out Margaret's barriers, made it wheelchair accessible, named it the Miller-Wilson Memorial. Our story became training for cops in nursing homes nationwide, how to spot fraud, how to fight back. Funny thing is, in trying to erase our legacy, Margaret ended up shining a spotlight so bright she made us stronger. I teach kids to fish now, right where Sarah taught me. Her knife passed down to the next generation. The house Margaret tried to steal. It's now the Wilson Senior Center. Every year, families gather for our fishing derby, honoring the real heroes, Sarah, Clara, Linda, and everyone who stood up to evil. 6 months later, a letter came from Florida. Another family asking about a Margaret showing up every Tuesday with papers. This fight's not over. The battle for justice never really ends. It just finds new front lines. So let me ask you, what would you do if you uncovered a criminal like Margaret in your neighborhood, but the law tried to stop you from helping? Drop your thoughts below. The more we share, the harder it is for predators to hide. If you made it to the end, you're part of this fight now. Tell us your stories, where you're from, what justice means to you. And watch out for anyone who shows up with too many documents and a smile that never quite reaches their eyes.